Hey guys, welcome back to another Versus episode. Apologies for taking a long time to get the next one out. I was a little discouraged by the poor performance of Jinx vs Caitlyn, although I did know that it was extremely late in regards to the topicality of Arcane, but I decided to give this series one more try since I do really enjoy the premise of this series, and also because I'm a little tired today and I don't have the mental energy to think about abstract game theory. Instead, we're gonna do this. Today's episode will be covering a rivalry that pits two very distinct hunters against one another, Kha'Zix vs Rengar. Which predator does it better? Ever since their very close release, Kha'Zix and Rengar's presence in the game stretches far beyond their competition as assassins and to a lesser extent as junglers. They have a storied history within their respective lores, and even an in-game interaction that has match-altering consequences. While one is from Ixtal and the other hails from the Void, their purpose in life is quite literally to kill the other, and I would say out of all rivalries, none are as contentious as Rengar and Kha'Zix. As per tradition, we're going to be comparing the champion's abilities, playstyles, synergies, properties, strengths, weaknesses, and more before making a final decision on which one was designed better or which one is stronger. And once again, depending on when you watch this video, either champion might be performing statistically better than the other, such as higher pick rate, win rate, recently buffed or nerfed, etc. So for the most part, I'm going to be looking at them from a conceptual level since balance is time sensitive, whereas this series is not meant to be, barring reworks and whatnot. Coincidentally though, Rengar just received a gameplay adjustment and is doing quite well after years of declining popularity, so this one is going to be an interesting fight. Let's get to it. Unlike the previous episodes, the gap between these two hunters' releases was only a month. Rengar went live on August 21st, 2012, while Kha'Zix came out on September 27th of the same year. Interestingly enough, Rengar's introduction was a teaser for Kha'Zix. For those who don't know, Rengar and Kha'Zix are both predator hunters. They roam around the world with essentially one goal in mind, to become the best. Rengar is a hunter who lives for the thrill of the chase by taking on the strongest, most dangerous beast he can find, while Kha'Zix aims to evolve into a perfect being by consuming his prey, absorbing their energy to mature his own. At one point, they crossed paths after Rengar was ordered by his father to claim Kha'Zix's head as a trophy. This is the ensuing battle that caused the former to lose his eye, which explains the eye patch. Their initial encounter left both mortally wounded but still alive, and both acknowledged each other as the biggest challenge to overcome. For Rengar, Kha'Zix is the trophy to end all trophies. The Voidborn's head will be proof that he's number one. For Kha'Zix, Rengar is the key to becoming the apex predator. By consuming his flesh, he can reach his final evolution. So unlike Garen and Darius, Yasuo and Yone, Jinx and Caitlyn, Rengar and Kha'Zix share a much more personally antagonistic relationship. As far as gameplay goes, their respective kits are extremely loyal to their MO. As predators, their design is naturally suited towards hunting their prey, and if you spend any amount of time watching National Geographic wildlife documentaries, element of surprise is the cornerstone of any skilled predator. But an apex predator isn't defined by their aggression alone. What makes them the best is that they're able to prey on others without being preyed on themselves, and so they need ways to deal with competing predators. Those are the two things we're going to be evaluating today. Here are the categories: DPS, burst, mobility, defense, solo, teamfight, utility, and consistency. I figured utility is a little bit better for explaining a champion as opposed to synergy, since that can really depend on circumstance. As a reminder, DPS measures persistent damage, a champion's uptime if you will, while burst measures exclusively front-loaded damage, how much they can do in the first few seconds of combat. Mobility covers both combat movements such as dashes, blinks, and whatnot, as well as tempo such as movement speed. Defense looks into any form of survivability, which can come in the form of evasion, sustenance, or durability. Solo determines how functional they are without the backing of their teammates, and in one-on-one scenarios. Teamfight covers the opposite, how well they perform against multiple members of the enemy team at once instead of duels. Utility touches on what kind of tools the champion has that could situationally augment their advantage or diminish their disadvantage. And lastly, consistency judges how reliable they are from situation to situation. After that, I want to give a final review on the design in relation to their background in the game's lore, which for this episode will be an interesting one to say the least. Now, determining which one had better DPS was quite challenging. At a forward glance, it may appear to be a tie considering Kha'Zix's Q, Taste Their Fear, has a base cooldown of 4 seconds which gets reduced to just over 2, meaning with a decent amount of cooldown reduction, Kha'Zix is a very spammable ability. On the other end, Rengar's Savagery also has a 4-second cooldown at rank 5, and he gets access to both his regular and empowered Savagery, the latter of which grants him a staggering attack speed buff for 5 seconds. Neither assassin runs short in the DPS department. Even if they fail to execute their target in one blow, they can continue their onslaught into extended trades thanks to their many tools. But I would argue Rengar inches out just a little. For one, his DPS is less conditional, as Kha'Zix requires the target to be isolated for the cooldown reset on top of spending one of his 3 evolution points toward that privilege. Rengar on the other hand has it available from the start. 2, Empowered Savagery's attack speed buff not only increases his attack frequency but also his jump frequency. The faster he can use his auto attacks, the more times he can jump on you, and these elements combined allow him to stick onto his opponents more consistently while hitting them with the same kind of beatdown potential as a Tryndamere or Jax. In Kha'Zix defense, this is only by a margin. Both assassins have uncharacteristically good uptime for a class mostly known for front-loaded damage. And if DPS was hard to figure out, I'm sure you can guess burst was even more difficult. Assassins are notorious for their one-shotting capabilities, and these two are no exception. Kha'Zix does over 330 damage plus 240% bonus AD against isolated targets on an ability with a very short cooldown. Combine this with his passive and W damage, the total reaches over 600 base plus 380% bonus AD. Squishies will die, no ifs, ands, or buts. But Rengar was one of the OG true one-shot champions. Maybe not to the same extent as the days of his triple empower Q, but if you layer his abilities together, it still comes pretty close. So here's the thing, there's two reasons why I put Rengar on top again for this one as well. The first is the same, Rengar's damage is less conditional. One might argue that Kha'Zix's reliance on isolation is cancelled out by Rengar's dependence on brushes, which is a valid point, but if we go by pure damage output, Rengar inches out since the lack of brushes doesn't necessarily weaken his abilities, it just weakens his mobility, which we'll get into later. Since Savagery is an empowered basic attack, it also gains the benefits of that property, such as on hit effects, crit chance, and such. Upfront damage is definitely in favor of Rengar. He's a lot more of an all-in champion compared to his rival, more eggs in the damage basket. Once again, that's not to say Kha'Zix can't deal his fair share of burst damage, he most certainly can. Moving on to mobility. Okay, so if Kha'Zix's conditional isolation is what let Rengar snag the trophies for DPS and burst, in the spirit of fairness, Kha'Zix wins out in mobility. In theory, if the entirety of a fight took place near brushes, and ideally with more than just champions to jump to, Rengar's mobility is better. But that's not always going to happen. A fight could break out in Dragon or Baron Pit, or his pressure decreases tremendously when fighting in either team's base because there's no brushes there. Kha'Zix has two consistent forms of mobility, Leap and Void Assault. Leap is just a standard free target dash, so he can use this to engage, to escape, or just to move around the map faster, and if he gets Evolve Wings, the jump goes farther and resets on takedown. Void Assault lets him reposition in the middle of a fight very reliably too. Rengar does have his ultimate Thrill of the Hunt, which grants him a jump out of stealth, but it can't be used reactively, it can only be used preemptively. That and his dashes are targeted, they require him to click on something to be used, whereas Kha'Zix doesn't need to, making him more flexible. So overall, you can rely on Kha'Zix's mobility more due to his being applicable in more contingencies. Rengar's mobility is arguably better in the right circumstances, though it only takes effect in combat. Now we arrive at defense. This one will be our first tie. The entire assassin subclass is high risk, high reward. They can dish out a lot of damage, but they can't really take it. Thing is, Kha'Zix and Rengar have defensive tools, but for different reasons. Kha'Zix's defense comes from his evasion and neutral gain. Thanks to Void Assault, he gets to reposition when engaging to avoid counterattack or to juke out opponents if they engage on him. Then of course I mentioned his higher freedom in mobility. Provided he doesn't get locked in place, he can jump away from pursuers. Finally, his Evolved Void Spikes is a long-range projectile that slows you for a ridiculous amount, whether isolated or not. It's one of the best projectiles for an assassin. As for Rengar, two words, Battle Roar. Everyone, and I repeat everyone, has witnessed the bullshit that is this ability. He can literally heal back all damage he takes with 2 casts of Battle Roar because the first one recovers half the damage he took, and then the second one cleanses him of all crowd control before healing him for another half of all damage he took. If you add those two halves together, it's 100%. If you don't apply grievous wounds to this guy, you essentially have to kill him twice. His resilience in combat is no short of exceptional, and if you go Bruiser Rengar, it gets even harder to kill him since he's tanky and sustainy. That said, his evasion and disadvantage is notably worse than his rival, so I'm going to give this point to both. Solo will also be a tie. They're predators, they're assassins, they work alone. Both Rengar and Kha'Zix are dangerous opponents to face by yourself. In single combat, Kha'Zix has full access to isolation, while Rengar has full access to rip you to shreds, as the only way to significantly mitigate either champion's pressure is by swimming with a buddy. Objectively, they're in their element in 1v1 fights. Now personally, I would much rather deal with Kha'Zix because at least against him, any damage dealt will actually, hurt him compared to Rengar who can just heal himself right back up. But in a vacuum, they're both absolute menaces to society. Now what about if we were to put these two against each other directly? That would come down to whoever strikes first. Either way, evenly matched. Team fighting is interesting for these two. Conventionally, assassins would prefer to participate in skirmishes or duels instead of full-blown 5v5s. With all the splash damage, disruption, and crowd control flinging around, it's easy to get caught in the crossfire. Kha'Zix has almost zero chance to get his isolation bonus, and Rengar is more prone to being jostled around or CC'd by tanks and supports, making it harder for either assassin to really do their job. However, what Rengar has that Kha'Zix doesn't is resilience. As mentioned before, he comes equipped with Battle Roar, effectively serving as a reset button with a double cast. He QSS's himself out of any crowd control and recovers back to full health barring healing reduction. Not to mention, his unconditional damage output once he does get within striking distance means he can use the chaos to his advantage, bypassing the enemy front line and wasting the back line. To his credit, Kha'Zix's evolved Void Spikes gives him a very solid way of slowing down enemy tempo while getting some free chip damage in. But I can't in good conscience say that Void Spike is better than Battle Roar in this scenario. Rengar players are experts at making the kitty look way more durable than he has any right to be. Like teamfighting, utility is also a sore spot for assassins. They're the most selfish class in the game, and any semblance of utility is more of a coincidental byproduct of their attacks than actual party utility. For example, Qiyana's supreme display of talent can set a team up for easy wombo combos, but at its core, the utility from that ultimate is largely to benefit herself. It's not like Malphite's ult where he needs the backing of his team to do the rest. Anyways, Kha'Zix wins out in this department. Rengar's Bullet Strike does have the ability to root his target in place, but if he does so, he loses out on the cleanse from Battle Roar or bonus offensive pressure from his Q. Kha'Zix's evolved spike racks are just far too good. It only slows, but the slow is so dang heavy that it may as well be a root. He's got more range and can tag multiple targets too. Now he does have to expend one of his 3 evolution points, but afterwards it becomes unconditionally accessible. Spike racks are just broken. In all honesty, it's too safe of an ability to have on an assassin. And now we're in the last category. In regards to consistency, it also has to go to Kha'Zix. Rengar's playstyle demands way more commitment in nature. Once he gets in, he has to fight his way out, and he lacks the versatility and relative safety of his rival. While it's true that in a contest of raw damage, Kha'Zix loses out to Rengar just barely, there is a reason the Praying Mantis withstood the test of time for much longer. True to his lore, he can adapt to just about any situation. In terms of build paths, Rengar has options in that department, such as full assassination or bruiser, but ultimately he plays more or less the same way. He's purely advantage focused. Kha'Zix has a weaker advantage state but a much better neutral and disadvantage. He's not as YOLO all or nothing. His constantly high presence and equally high win rate is a testament to that. Rengar may be doing a lot better thanks to his recent changes, but Kha'Zix has been around for years, never falling out of favor. He is one of the most flexible assassins in the game for a reason. So having said all that, the tally goes to 3 wins for Rengar, 3 wins for Kha'Zix, and 2 draws. That being said, I still think Kha'Zix overall has better gameplay and a more well-rounded design because consistency is weighted more than damage for a lot of players. In fact, he's living proof that adaptability and consistency are paramount to good performance. His entire motif is about evolution, getting stronger and smarter with each encounter. Rengar as a hunter is probably just as intelligent and resourceful, but in-game, there's not much he can do to change up his playstyle, certainly not midway through a match. Once he starts building lethality one-shot burst, he can't randomly switch to a Gordrink or Death's Dance approach without sacrificing a lot of gold. Be that as it may, I don't think it's wise to discount the sheer terror of Rengar's assault capabilities. Kha'Zix may be a jack of all trades, but like I said, Rengar from seasons 4 to 6 was the stuff of nightmares. Triple empowered Q, 3000 damage in half a second, this guy was a demon. He may have fallen off in recent years, but with the new adjustments to his abilities, he seems to be more or less back on top. Now, before we wrap up this video though, I want to address their in-game interaction. If Rengar and Kha'Zix are on opposing teams and Rengar maxes out his Bone Tooth necklace while Kha'Zix reaches level 16, there's an event that takes place called the Hunt is On, upon which whoever scores a takedown over the other will earn a permanent buff for the rest of the game. Rengar gets a 6th stack of his Bone Tooth necklace, increasing his AD bonus from 25% to 36%, that's very significant. Kha'Zix on the other hand gains a 4th evolution, allowing all 4 abilities to be evolved. So which one's better? Considering this can only take place in the late game due to needing level 16 on Ka, I'd say the 4th evolution is better. By 5 to 6 items, 11% more attack damage won't really matter all that much if you think about it. At that point, everyone who can get one-shotted is getting one-shotted anyway. Having a 4th evolution though can mean a lot, especially if you evolve this Q early. Anyways, that's gonna be it for today. Let me know your own thoughts on this matchup. Do you think Rengar is the better assassin or Kha'Zix? I'm on the side of the Void Mantis, but maybe some of you can make a better case for the kitty cat. Feel free to let me know. But if you enjoyed the video, please be sure to leave a like and subscribe. Consider following me on Twitter, joining my Discord server, and checking out my other Versus videos if you haven't yet. For now though, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.